How America Was Stolen, Episode 21. The colonies believed they had won. That was their greatest mistake. Because victory in one place only created hunger in another, Episode 21 begins as the frontier shifts westward, pulling violence, ambition, and destruction along with it like a shadow. The land in the east was filling up. Farms grew crowded, towns expanded. Land became valuable and scarcity creates pressure. So the colonies did what they had learned to do best. They moved. Beyond the settled towns lay vast native territories, forests, rivers, plains, lands mapped only by the people who lived there. To the colonies, these spaces were described as empty, unused, or wild. But they weren't empty. They were home. Native nations in these regions had watched from a distance as news spread east to west. Stories of massacres, broken treaties, and forced removals traveled long before settlers arrived. They knew what was coming. Some prepared for war, some sought alliances, some tried to avoid contact entirely. But the settlers came anyway. This new phase of expansion wasn't chaotic like the early years. It was organized. Land companies purchased claims. Colonial governments issued permits. Surveyors carved straight lines across curved landscapes. Land was reduced to measurements. People were reduced to obstacles. And every time a native nation resisted, settlers responded the same way they had learned before: collective punishment, destruction of food sources, and permanent occupation. The frontier didn't just move, it consumed. What made this phase especially brutal was repetition. The cycle became predictable. Settlers arrived. Tensions rose, violence erupted. Native communities were crushed. The land was absorbed. Then the process began again, farther west. Each time the colonies became more efficient. Each time the suffering multiplied. Native nations were not passive. They fought back fiercely. Some launched surprise attacks on settlements. Others united across tribal lines. Leaders emerged who understood that survival depended on coordination, not isolation. But the imbalance was growing. Settlers had guns, supplies, reinforcements, and endless waves of newcomers. Native nations were fighting for survival with finite people and sacred land that could not be replaced. Time favored the invader. What the colonies did next revealed something even darker. They began using native allies against other native nations. Tribes who cooperated were promised protection. Tribes who resisted were targeted for destruction. This divide-and-conquer strategy shattered unity and deepened trauma. Native people were forced into impossible choices: fight and risk annihilation, or cooperate and risk betrayal. Either way, the land was taken. By the early 1700s, expansion had become a machine. Colonial children grew up believing the frontier was endless, that native disappearance was natural, that the land was theirs by destiny. These beliefs hardened into ideology. An ideology, once accepted, doesn't question itself. This episode reveals the truth behind the myth of the frontier. It wasn't brave exploration. It wasn't peaceful settlement. It was an ongoing invasion, a moving line of destruction that never intended to stop. But the story is far from over, because the farther west the frontier moved, the stronger the resistance would become. New leaders would rise, new confederacies would form, and the conflicts ahead would be larger, bloodier, and more consequential than anything before.